So, all right, 159, I guess. Hey, here we are. So our director, hello? Yeah,
I'm just
our dir
saying hi because we're
oh,
starting
okay.
the show.
Our director suggested we start with J.K. Rowling, who often gets in like hassles with people for her controversial views about stuff, with the latest one being I think that she doesn't think that trans women are women. I looked at a little. She got mad that there was an article that was directed at people who menstruate, and she got mad and said, "Why don't you just call them women?" And even though the article was about services for related to menstruation, and then Twitter got all over her, and I would just say in general, I put her in the same bucket as Elon Musk. Um, People who have a shitload of money and who would be well served to just shut up about certain things that just get themselves in trouble. It's like, why make trouble for yourself with your opinions that I don't know, I think she kind of thinks that the trans women aren't women, and it's like, you wrote this beloved series, and you keep and so every book you write that relates to that series will make you another $40 million. So what are you doing? And Elon Musk, he gets in trouble. He gets stoned. He goes on Joe Rogan. He says shit. He tweets shit about his company. He's even been prohibited from tweeting shit about his company by the FEC, because he's just a loose cannon. And like, why not just if I don't know. I don't know. On the other hand, here we are just saying our opinions all over the place, and I personally love it when celebrities say shit that I agree with, and I'm sure you do too.
Well, I guess this is my turn to respond. I still think that transgender people are crazy. I think that chopping off part of your body to
Except
make
almost nobody
yourself the
does that,
opposite.
except I mean maybe boobs, but like nobody chops off the penis or the vagina.
Okay, Rick, I'm sorry. First of all, you're interrupting me. But
Yeah,
secondly,
that's
of
true.
course they're chopping off penises and vaginas. That that's like okay. I don't care if it's one guy. They're doing it, and the people that do that are nuts. And I don't think there's anything controversial for her to say that, for J.K. Rowling to say that. I actually think that it's controversial not to believe that they're crazy. I think the reverse is true. That when somebody whacks off their genitals, that is a crazy person, and to say that should be the norm, that to me is controversial.
Or also,
And
let me
wait, and,
let me
and
can
wait,
I let me I got a question for you. But
yes.
which is like, the reading I've done suggests that less than 1% of trans people right now are getting bottom surgery. So what if we left that aside? How crazy is it for somebody to say, I was born with a male body, but I feel that I'm a female, or vice versa, and I'm just going to live that way?
Yeah,
And
that's crazy. That means that you're crazy.
why?
If you
What the,
Why? Because
or okay, instead of why, it's like, what skin is it off of your junk? Um,
I'm not going to go. I'm not going to live in a world where people are whacking off their genitals
but no,
and
but
saying this is the way things should be.
but
You,
aside from whacking off the genitals, like, which is only a 1% thing, what about the just people like there's that guy, there's that woman, no, the guy, there's a guy um, married to a woman who's become pregnant and had two babies, and he's a dude. He was born a woman. He decided he wanted to live as a man, but he still has all the reproductive equipment of a woman, and so he's birthed two babies. but he likes living as a man. And like, what skin is it off of your butt that this guy with a mustache and maybe a goatee, wants to live as a man, um, and he's married and he's just he's happy living as a man, and he's also happy, I guess, to be able to give birth.
Okay, you keep rephrasing the question like it's a matter of what skin is it off my butt. So imagine two scientists looking at a frog, okay? And one of them says, this is a frog. And the other one says, well, listen, I know it's biologically a frog, but I want to call it a horse. Now, what skin is it off your butt if I call it a horse? The
Well,
point is, it's Rick, it's not a matter of whether it's skin off my butt. It's just that if you were born a man, you're a man. If you were born a woman, you're a woman.
yeah, but what if you want to live? What if you want to live as the opposite gender?
Then
And
you're crazy. That means that you're crazy.
yeah, but functionally, what does it do to you? What is it? How does it hurt you personally? How does it hurt fucking society? What is it? If now, say like this dude who's been able to get pregnant, which, and that aside, but if he weren't pregnant, and when he's not pregnant because he's taking the hormones to be a dude, if you were working with him or if you ran into him in on the street or at a in a place of business, you'd see a dude, and you wouldn't know that he was born with a vagina and still has a vagina. And or you might even get together socially. You might see him at a party with his wife, and he'd be a guy at a party with his wife. And so what is the big deal if the guy was born with a vagina and still has a vagina, and he's just living as a guy his frickin' life?
Well, because the big deal is that I would be living in a world where people said that crazy people are sane, and it would, don't interrupt me, I actually do think that it's changing people's values so that more and more young people, I mean, an astounding number of young people, are thinking that this is the way to go. And not only is the original person that does this to themselves crazy, but it's becoming very fashionable for young people to want to change their genders and mutilate themselves. And I believe from the research I've done, the lectures I've heard from people that regretted it, that it is a terrible insanity that leads to self-mutilation and is to be strongly discouraged. And when it happens to somebody, it's very often a tragedy.
Yeah, okay, so
Wait, don't interrupt me, because you asked me a stupid question. And my point is that I've heard, I happen to listen to lectures by prominent people that study transgenderism. One of the people I've listened to is a very famous guy that regretted chopping his penis off. And he said that he was one of the first people to do it. And he said it was the worst decision of his life. And that it can happen to people that are weak and confused psychologically, that they can become attracted to this idea, and maybe a psychologist that encourages it, or a parent, or a group of friends, and they end up making a terrible decision that they regret, and very, very often they kill themselves. Don't interrupt me. Yes, it turns out, Rick, that an enormous number of people that whack their genitals off end up regretting it and killing themselves. So when you say, what skin off my butt is there? I think it's a disgusting, sick, dangerous practice that ends most of the time in tragedy. And that's why I don't think it's really cool. And when J.K. Rowling says this is bad, I agree with her.
except that only 0.6% That is, only one person, less than one trans person in 150 is getting the bottom surgery. And it's not like they all they're that everybody else is if they just have the money or the pain tolerance or whatever. A gazillion trans people are now living like Caitlyn Jenner. You got a problem with Caitlyn Jenner?
Yes, I do.
But Caitlyn Jenner, as far as we know, and we would know otherwise since she's a subject of all sorts of gossip, like Caitlyn Jenner just wants to live as a woman, but Caitlyn Jenner, like most trans people, doesn't want to lose her dick. She's a woman, but she's got a dick and balls. And most people are living that way. So when you talk about the tragedy of chopping off your dick and regretting it, first you're starting with only zero point 0.6 of 0.6% of people are getting the surgery. Now let's assume that out of that 0.6%, maybe a third of everybody is happy, or a half of everybody. So that means that you've got 0.3%. That is one person in 300 who's trans, who's sad about getting the surgery. So that means that the vast majority of trans people aren't sad about getting the surgery because they don't get the surgery, or if they do get the surgery, a percentage of those people are content with the results. So you've only got like 1/3 of 1% of trans people who had the surgery and are upset about it.
All right. Now I have to explain something to our millions of listeners. Every time we've had this discussion, we've gotten into this same rat hole. So I have to explain this to people. I've been reading a lot about idiot savants, and I used to think that Rick had an incredibly high IQ. But now I've decided he's one of those idiot savants. He does have a very high IQ, except that there's something terribly wrong with his thinking. And one of the weirdest arguments that he's come up with is that to him it makes a lot of sense. It's a big deal that a smaller percentage of transgenders are getting the bottom surgery. Now, you may think that this is ridiculous if you're a viewer. But no, you have to understand, I've needed to endure this argument 10 times. Somewhere along the line, maybe 2 years ago, Rick figured out that a smaller number of transgenders are getting the bottom surgery. Most of them are just getting the top surgery. And that's supposed to make a big difference in his mind. And I'm saying he's not the smartest man in the world, but he is a sort of a savant. So in his mind, that makes a big difference. So here is my retort, Rick. Thousands and thousands of people, more every year, are getting their genitals hacked off. I don't care if it's a smaller percentage getting the bottom surgery. It's all crazy. It's all tragic. It's all mental illness.
So say it is mental illness, but let's talk about the top surgery, because the top surgery is easy, because a gazillion people, probably more people, get top surgery who aren't trans than who are, because people get boob jobs all the time. Women get boob jobs. Chrissy Teigen just had her boobs taken out because she got them when she was in her 20s. She's 34 now. She said she just wanted to be comfortable, and she's that she said she's done needing them. She was a supermodel, a swimsuit model, so she needed nice boobs, but now she's like, I can get away with the smaller boobs. So like people get
Wait,
boobs.
Did she get a boob job to make her boobs bigger?
Yeah, when she was in her 20s, when she was a Sports Illustrated model. Now
Okay.
she's a mom, and she said she just wants to be able to lie on her stomach without it being uncomfortable.
Yeah, that's another form of mental illness. Women reducing the size of their boobs. That's actually also crazy. I wish we should make that illegal.
What?
In
Okay.
fact, what is J.K. Rowling
just making
saying
a
about
joke.
that?
All right, but anyway, the top surgery is easy. People do that just like like falling off logs, or I don't know. It's like going to the dentist. Not quite. I mean,
Yeah, but the difference is that the female breast is attractive to people, and it's normal for a woman or anybody to want to improve their appearance. That's not comparable
Yeah,
to
I'm not
changing your
arguing with you
genital.
about that. I'm not arguing about. I'm just saying that the top surgery, if you have regrets about it, that shit's reversible pretty reasonably. I mean, it's much more reversible than the fucking bottom surgery. And obviously more people get top surgery whether they're trans or not. You know, a lot of people mess with their boobs. You know,
Yeah, I don't think the argument is relevant, Rick. I don't understand.
just that a lot of people are living trans, and maybe not all the time. I mean, if you just if you decide you're trans and if you go through the necessary screening and all that shit, which is not trivial. I mean, if the screening to say to get the hormones, that's
What screening? What
you
screening are
have
you
to,
talking about?
unless you're a do-it-yourselfer who's gonna forge a prescription and then um, order hormones on the gray market from India. You need to talk to a doctor and probably a therapist to certify that they think that you're just not fucking around, that you have an actual well-rooted um, that that you're saying that you would be more comfortable living as the gender that you weren't born as, that
Yeah.
that's well founded and you're not just
So
like,
so there are these two sages, these two scientific experts, and they've been certified by a foundation of thousands of scientists that have used the most advanced theories. And these sages, the therapist and the doctor, they approach you and ask you searching questions. You spend years getting to the root of the issues, and then finally, in their learned and knowledgeable opinion, they've decided, yes, this person really does need to be changed into a woman. Or conversely, they say, no, no, this doesn't meet the scientific criteria of the Helsinki Convention, of the Vienna Convention. Therefore, we can't go ahead with it. We're going to have to call it off. No, I don't think it works that way, Rick. I think you go meet an asshole who says, you want to be a woman? Fine. And he gives you the drugs, and in 6 months he chops your dick off. That's how it works,
that
Rick.
doesn't, nobody gets the very less than 2/3 of 1% get their dick chopped off. And I know this for sure because I used to live in Colorado
What if it
where,
is? What if it is only less than 2/3 of 1%? Who cares how many it is?
well,
I'm saying even if it happens to only 1,000 people a year, my argument is still valid. It's
yeah, but what
still
about the million
insane.
people who
What?
are living contently with as as opposite the gender they were born as?
Well, I have an answer for that. Back in the 19th century, there were these guys that thought they were Napoleon. And sometimes they put them in insane asylums where they chained them up and just brought them food every week. And sometimes, if they were rich,
Yeah,
they
but you
could
didn't
stay in
have.
their mansion, and their family would say, "Okay, he thinks he's Napoleon, so let's just humor him, and he'll be okay." And he would walk around his mansion in New York or in Illinois saying he was Napoleon, and everyone made him feel okay about being Napoleon. He was
Yeah,
still crazy.
you didn't have millions. I just think you're dumb on this. You didn't have millions of Napoleons. Are you saying that every ladyboy in Thailand is fucking crazy? Are you saying that the people in India and people in native people, the people across all the different cultures who've decided to live as the opposite gender, that every single one of those people has a mental disease?
Yes, that's what I'm saying.
I think it's stupid because it's pervasive. It's not. it's not 10% of the population. It might not even be 1%, but it's a significant chunk of, it may even be 1 or 1.5%, but it's a lot of people are more comfortable living as the opposite gender.
Yeah. Well, I can tell you this much. Now, a lot of people hate the Jewish religion, but one of the things that the Jewish religion says is that we're going to have to divide men from women. And so, according to Judaism, homosexuality was not permitted, at least between men. It doesn't say anything about women. But one of the things it said was that men were not permitted to dress as women, and women were not permitted to dress as men. And the reason is because the Jewish people originated in a Mesopotamian world where the genders were, where societies allowed genders to be completely dissolved. So, in answer to your question, there are societies that have accepted a huge number of their population deciding to be the different gender. But that doesn't mean I have to go along with it.
All
India,
right.
maybe, Thailand, I don't know. There are societies that will allow it, but I don't think it's the right thing. I don't think it's a healthy
Hold
development.
on 1 second. We got
And
somebody's
there's
phone
something
is
talking. What's going on in the background there, director?
director.
Who's talking?
Director. Hey,
Cut,
director.
director, cut, cut.
Okay,
All right,
so
well,
I'm going to discuss some scuttlebutt,
all right.
unsubstantiated. It's common knowledge that um, for the last few years, Lindsey Graham has been very loyal to Trump and very supportive, and that this was an abrupt turnabout. That in 2015 and 2016, Lindsey Graham was saying that Trump is a kook and would be a disaster as president. But then he abruptly became a staunch supporter. And it's been suggested and on Twitter and just wherever people say shit, that, he's probably being blackmailed, that they have something on him and they're just forcing him to. And yeah, everybody just is like, nobody, it's nobody knows, and just everybody's like, whatever, maybe it is. But what matters more is that he's a supporter, and not what is causing him to be a supporter. Until, I don't know, a couple days ago, when a male escort said that he is throwing away his NDA, his non-disclosure agreement that Lindsey Graham made him sign, and he's urging other male escorts who've been with Lindsey Graham to to disregard their NDAs, um, and that this escort is saying that he's talked to a lawyer, and the lawyer, and it doesn't seem to be, he doesn't think it's enforceable anyway, and so anyway, it's the first big rumblings of the case that Lindsey Graham, who there's might be getting with male escorts, and that might be and he actually might be being blackmailed. So that's just a thing. We
Well,
can talk about it
well,
or not.
Rick, as a true liberal, I would assume that that would make Lindsey Graham a hero to you. I
Well,
mean, he's getting
as
with
I
guys. That
tweeted,
you love that, don't you?
to great acclaim, it's not that he's getting with male escorts. It's
Uh-huh.
that it's that it potentially subjecting him to blackmail, and that he's been so anti-LGBTQ during his government career, um, which
Has he?
it's
Has he
yeah,
been?
he's staunchly anti-gay marriage. Yeah.
Well, maybe he's just against gay marriage, but he himself is gay.
Well, he's never come out as gay, and that's his own choice. But if he is gay, and if he's getting with gay escorts, and um, he's stepping on gay rights, then
In
people
what way?
consider
What
that.
gay rights? Couldn't you be gay and be against gay marriage?
But he's not. He doesn't acknowledge being gay, and I haven't looked at his record, but he's known to be in the Republican way to be anti-gay stuff.
Yeah, but he's that should make you love him all the more because society is so oppressive to homosexuals that this man couldn't reveal his true feelings.
Yeah, but then he's oppressing the people who he is. It's a hypocritical.
I don't think it's oppressing other gays to say you're against gay marriage.
Well, yeah, if you're voting against gay marriage, if you're
Yeah, yeah, that's okay. You can be against gay marriage and be gay.
yeah, but he doesn't acknowledge being gay, so that makes him hypocritical.
No, I mean he may want to keep his private life secret. But what I'm saying is you could be openly or secretly gay and still be against gay marriage.
Okay, fine. Should we move on from there?
Well, all right, fine. So I wanted to bring something up, and because Maya is coming on in 10 minutes, we won't have a chance to have an hour-long argument about it. And it doesn't need to have an hour-long argument about it. I just have something that happened this week, and I want to ask you a question about it.
Okay.
So, for the millions of viewers that haven't seen our show, Rick still believes that Trump is somehow connected with Russia. Every time I use a word, he disputes it. But the Democrat leaders said that Trump colluded with Russia. That means Adam Schiff and Brennan and Comey and I always forget his name. The head of the Clapper. Thank you. Somebody always has to help me with that. Clapper. Anyway, they all said that Trump colluded with Russia, as did most of the Democrat leaders. Well, and so Trump believes or Rick believes some connection with Russia, but he doesn't allow me to say what exactly it is.
No,
Now,
I've said it. I've said that Trump is entangled and is manipulated by Russia.
Okay. So this week, Rod Rosenstein, who was the Assistant Attorney General, actually was the man that hired Mueller to investigate Trump for Russian collusion. So there was one guy above Mueller. We all know the Mueller report, the Mueller investigation.
Wait, I got a question.
Yeah.
Was Rosenstein appointed by Trump?
No. Rosenstein was the Assistant Attorney General when Trump became president.
Okay.
And he hired Mueller to investigate Trump to see whether Trump had collusion with Russia. Well, they asked him in the Senate. Lindsey Graham held a Senate meeting with Rod Rosenstein this week, just days ago. And they asked him about this, and Rod Rosenstein said, yes, it's true. The Mueller investigation found that there is no evidence of any collusion between Trump and Russia. Now, my question to you is this. Since Clapper said that, the head of intelligence, and Yates said that, the Assistant Attorney General, and Rod Rosenstein said that, the man that actually launched the investigation into Trump's Russia connections. If they all say that there was no evidence that Trump colluded with Russia, does this new information change any of the ideas that have been deeply implanted into your mind by the Democrat Party? Do you still believe that Trump is mixed up with Russia, even though the man that hired Mueller says he was not?
Well, I mean, I can lay out what I think, which is that Um,
Why is address Rod Rosenstein saying this? Does that
okay,
influence you at all? In other words, knowing this, does it change anything that you thought before I told you? Is it meaningless to you?
it's not that meaningful. I mean, we know that, and the only people who deny that Russia tried to meddle in the election in
That's not the
favor of.
same thing. No, no, no. We're not talking about that.
I know, okay,
We're
but like
trying.
I'm trying to give you the landscape of what I believe. So we know Russia's intent and actions to
No,
some
no. We
extent.
actually we don't because
I know because
I
one
told
guy
you.
said he liked Hillary. One Russian guy in
No,
footnote
no, 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 no,
349.
no, 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 no. There was one Russian source, the source that helped write the dossier for Christopher Steele, said that the Russians preferred Hillary, but that's not enough. There was actually the assistant to Brennan, the head of the CIA, also says that Brennan destroyed evidence that the Russians preferred Hillary.
No, no. So like only retarded right-wing dupes believe that shit. I mean, that's
No,
just.
actually, the person that helped Christopher Steele write the dossier that got the FISA warrant, he said that Russia preferred Hillary, and that's in the IG report.
Yeah, one footnote. It's either you showed it to me. It's either footnote 347 or 349 in the
Yeah,
IG report.
it's not very long, but that it doesn't have to be long. It can be a footnote, Rick.
So one guy,
Wait, no, no, there's another guy.
One
Okay,
guy in the Russian
and
government liked Hillary. So, but
yeah,
really,
no, no,
I
no,
mean,
no. He said that the Russians preferred Hillary. It wasn't just him personally. And also, the assistant to Brennan says that the Russians preferred Hillary.
no,
The assistant to the
so
to the
I don't,
to
I
the,
don't
of the
buy that
CIA.
one. I don't buy that shit one bit. That's just fucking desperate right wing fucking Dan Boingo Oingo bullshit. Um, and so anyway, I fully believe that the Russians wanted Trump and did some stuff to try to help him, and uh, so I believe that. I also believe that Trump is a political amateur, right? That was his whole selling point. I mean, I don't have to prove that. He hadn't been in government at all. He'd been in business his whole fucking life, internationally. And I believe that Trump is used to doing what he wants, that he's had a career as a developer, and he's had a very successful career of licensing his name internationally, putting his name on foreign projects, getting paid to use his name as a symbol of class. Um, just, there are Trump buildings, whether he owns them or not, around the world. And he wanted to do business in Russia, along with some other places. And he did do business with various rich people, including rich Russians. Um, and so, I believe that he doesn't give a shit about political protocol.
By the way, you have no proof of any of this. You're just making up a little
No,
scenario.
there are entire books about Trump's business deals.
Well,
He
listen,
had
listen.
Russian oligarchs living, like buying properties in Trump Tower,
So
living on the
what?
floors below him.
So
I mean,
what? So what?
well, I
But
don't have
Rick,
to.
Rick,
I don't. So
Rick.
fucking wait. I wasn't drawing conclusions yet. I just said this stuff is true. Trump is an international businessman.
Okay,
Right? And
Rick.
some of the people he did business with were Russians. That's indisputable.
Rick. It's only a 2-hour show. I just had a simple question. When Rod Rosenstein said that Trump did not collude with Russia, according to the findings of the Mueller investigation, he said that this week. Does that mean anything to you at all, or
I
does
guess pretty
the
much
weird
not.
story?
Pretty much not. We
Yeah,
know
yeah.
that
So
because
you
we
still
know.
think that Trump colluded with Russia?
No, I think, like I said, I think that. Well, I think that we don't know exactly what he did because Trump and his people stonewalled much of the Mueller investigation. They weren't forthcoming. You know how Trump said that he would release his taxes? He's never released his taxes. It's 4 years after his campaign, and he's
So
never
even
released his taxes. And
so even
similarly,
even
he
if the head of
and his people stonewalled a bunch of shit pertaining to the investigation. And
so
so the
even if the head of the investigation, Rod Rosenstein, tells you, announces to the American people before the Senate, even if he says that Trump did not collude with Russia, you still don't believe that.
that's
He's
not what
lying.
he said. He said that
Or
everybody says that there's no evidence that he colluded with Russia.
that's what he said, yes. That
Evidence.
Trump did not
So you're
collude with Russia.
misstating what he said. And
No, I
why?
don't know the exact wording, but my point is that nothing there isn't anybody alive that could possibly dislodge this fantasy. The
No,
Democrats have
because it's
brainwashed you.
fucking well founded.
But why is he lying? Why is the head of the Mueller investigation, Rod Rosenstein,
He's not lying. He's not
why
lying.
is he lying?
When asked about evidence, all these
Yes.
guys say that there may be they say that there's no direct evidence of
No,
whatever they define collusion as.
Rod Rosenstein said that Trump did not collude with Russia.
So
Don't quibble about the words. This is what Rod Rosenstein's findings were. He was the head of the Mueller investigation, and he said Trump did not collude with Russia.
I'm not very convinced, but
why? Why
like I
does it
said,
mean
I've
nothing
been
to you?
saying, no,
Why?
shut up for a second. I'm not saying that Trump actively colluded with Russia. I've been saying for weeks, if not months and years, that Trump was entangled with Russians and was likely manipulated by Russia.
That's not what Rod Rosenstein found.
Yeah, but Rod
They did not
Rosenstein's
find that.
investigations were stonewalled by Trump. So if you want to point me at a source, when we break, I can go read exactly what Rosenstein said, and it probably won't change my mind.
No, but my point is, no matter how I phrase it, Rick, it's not something that you can quibble about. I know you're a savant, so you're trying to get a phrase that you can argue about. Rod Rosenstein said that Trump did not collude with Russia. That was his findings this week. Now, why does that not convince you of anything? I just don't understand it. In other words, if the person that was the head of the investigation went on for 2 years.
Regardless of what these guys say, it's been fairly well established, very well established, what the deal with Trump and Russia is.
No, it hasn't been established because Rod Rosenstein, who was the head of the Mueller investigation, said it did not occur. Why does that mean nothing to you? Are you so badly brainwashed?
Take a break.
That no evidence can make any difference. No testimony. The guy that he was more investigative of Trump than you were. He said about 14 lawyers, $35 million, 2 years of investigation. After all that, he said Trump did not collude with Russia, and you still don't believe it. You're the one holding out. Even beyond
Trump is
Rosenstein.
entangled with Russia. Did Trump actively plot with Russia to share information and to fuck with the election? No. Was he entangled with Russians? Yeah. Is Trump a sleazy?
No. Rosenstein said he did not work. He was not involved with Russia. There's no connection between Russia and Trump. It's in your imagination. The Democrats put it in your mind, and now no evidence can change it.
Okay, fine. I guess so. Fine. Fucking fine. We'll move on, asshole.
Thank you. So, Maya, why don't you open up?
Hey, Maya.
Hi. So,
hey.
Can you guys hear me okay?
Yes.
Okay. So, what did I miss? Because I've gotten so ridiculously depressed over this last week that I can't even think straight. But I'll try. I'll do my best.
We talked about nonsense. We talked about whether transgender people are legit. We talked about Lindsey Graham. I mean, it's not nonsense, but we didn't talk about anything that's pertinent to the big events of this week yet.
Right. Okay.
But so why don't you talk about what has depressed you this week? Because I'm sure it's connected to what's going on.
Well, yeah, and I think the sad part is that the part that really like tears at the fabric of my soul. I mean, this is really just intense for me is that I feel like the mob, the like they are winning, whatever it is, because they're driving the narrative, they're driving the because I've seen so many, I follow on YouTube so many conservatives and black conservatives who are saying that the whole, police is hunting down blacks is nonsense. It's not true. If you don't, it depends on what area you're in, how many interactions with police you have. There's so many factors, right? I don't want to go into each and every little detail right now, but I think the fact that you have mobs tearing up the streets and burning down. I mean, you all live in where I live, right? So it's like Santa Monica is on fire, businesses looted, just so many things that destroyed. And after all of these weeks of shutdown, we're finally hoping to come out of the shutdown, and now there's nothing to come back to because we've burned and destroyed all of it. And you have people on TV. You got Fredo Cuomo on TV going, "Show me where it says that rioters have to be polite and peaceful." I don't know. First Amendment, maybe. Like, have you read that thing? It's right there on the very first paragraph, right? Peaceably assemble. So, I mean, it's just to me like the fact that the people who watch CNN, NBC, MSNBC, ABC, all of the mainstream media, they're just they're kowtowing to the mob. They're trying to make excuses for them. They're trying to say that yes, that death was tragic. Nobody that I know, right, left, black, white, male, female, doesn't matter, gender. Nobody thinks that that death was justified in any way. It was horrible. It was horrific. I couldn't watch it. As soon as I saw what was happening, I literally turned off the video because I wanted to see what actually happened, and I was praying that that it actually didn't say what it actually said, right? Because nobody thought that that was human, human in any way. It was inhumane. It was horrible. But that said, the fact that this man has now been elevated to, I mean, apparently we've all forgotten about Corona. Remember Corona? Apparently that doesn't exist
No, I mean,
anymore.
I've spent the last 2 days talking about the protests and coronavirus with people on Twitter, and
Right.
I can talk about that for a long time. And
Yeah, I'm sure. Have you seen the pictures from Philadelphia yesterday, right?
yeah, and Philadelphia back in 1918 was the site of the biggest outbreak of Spanish flu,
Right.
because they held a war bond parade and everybody got too close to each other, and that was the deadliest year in all of American history when 195,000 Americans died that in October 1918, with Philadelphia being a big part of that because uh, America opened up and
Right.
people got too close, um, and so yeah, you have, I don't know. I'm guessing. I haven't seen numbers. I tried to find them, but nobody really knows the numbers. How many people have been out there protesting?
It's
And
been
from
thousands. I mean, the pictures I've seen, it looked like thousands and thousands. Have you seen the
right, so
pictures?
it may be in 150 cities and towns, maybe 100,000 people total. Um, Most of them wearing masks, but nobody knows how effective the masks really are. Um, so yeah, it's concerning, and even the protesters are depending on who they are, because it's a whole mix of different people.
Right.
Um, there's are different levels of concern among people out there. Um, um,
Right, but see, but I think, like I
and
said,
yeah,
the concern. Go ahead. I'm sorry. Go
and
ahead.
it does to me. It feels a little bit like Corona's been put on the back burner, but
Right.
it's still there, but I think people will become more aware of it
Hmm.
because I think we're about to have, I don't know if it's going to be a steep uptick in new cases, but we're going to have more. It's been going down, not to zero, but maybe to about half of what it was when it was at its worst. And I
Right.
think
Nowhere
it's
near the exponential growth that they've been threatening us with.
no,
Right.
but
Nowhere
it's
near
been
that.
pretty steady. The number of new cases every day nationwide has been remarkably steady at between 20,000 and 25,000 a day. Whether that reflects a steady amount of people with it in the country is hard to tell because the number of tests have been increasing from about 200,000 a day a month ago to 500,000 a day over the
Right.
past couple of days. So it's hard, it's hard to get a handle on it. But
Right. But
it's
so if we're going to get off the riots for a second and go back to Corona for a second, my sister works at a hospital where they've been COVID designated testing center down in Orange County for a long time, and they've had people trickling in from like 10 to like 30 a day, and so every time that you have somebody who, like a patient who is affected, then everybody who came in contact with that patient has to be retested, and if they and she tells me, like, how people react. They go, oh well, mine is positive again, great, I have to go home and quarantine myself. But the point is that nothing happens. It's not like, because the whole point about this was like, you go outside, you get corona, you die. Which, like I said, they kind of act like, oh, okay, now I'm showing positive again because I have to show two negatives in order to go back to work, right? So they have to go, they have to quarantine, they have to wait a week, then they have to come back, they have to retest. Okay, now it's negative. Okay, now I have to wait for another negative. Because basically, people are recovering. I personally know one of my best friends, her father is 87 years old. He got it, he recovered. And then my other friend is telling me, well, she knows somebody whose father got it and died. Yes, people in their 80s and 90s will, yes, I mean, shit happens. And nobody says that every life is precious. We're going to go back to that, right? But the point is that this virus is nowhere near the catastrophe that they made it out to be. We did not need to choke out the best economy ever in order to protect what, a dozen. We're saving dozens, or we're claiming that we're saving dozens while we're destroying millions and millions and millions.
well,
So
no, I mean the Trump was not the way he's spoken about that he saved millions of people. He's only misspeaking. He's only half misspeaking. That if we just if we didn't do anything, which would be ridiculous, because every country, even the shittiest countries, except maybe Turkmenistan, um, has done something. Um, but
well,
that if you did
Sweden has
nothing, and
done
if people
something.
just, what's that?
I said Sweden has done something, but nowhere near what we did. Let me look at something real
Right. Well,
quick.
Sweden, the people in that government, a government spokesman just this week said that, yeah, they fucked up, that they didn't have
Mm.
to have as many people dying as they have. Um,
Well, but again,
Rick,
that goes
Rick,
back. Oops, I think I
Sweden,
lost you guys
you
again.
love you.
Oh, there
Can
you
you
are.
hear me?
I can
Okay,
hear you.
yes.
Sweden. Rick, Sweden has 10 million people and they lost about 4,500, and they didn't lock down at all. So I think
Yeah, and
4,500
they're
people.
losing another.
Yeah.
No,
Yeah,
I can look it up right
they've
now if
lost
you want.
4,700.
Okay.
They've lost 4,669 or something, and they lose another 80 to 100 a day. So I mean,
And if they
uh,
protected the nursing homes as they should have done, they would have lost even less. So they really,
all right.
they're
But anyway,
completely
their
safe in
death
the nursing
rate
home.
is 10 times that of the neighboring countries. So
Right, but
they
it's
lost a
not
few
10
thousand
times
people,
France or
but they
Britain
didn't.
or Spain. It's lower than France, Britain, and Spain and Belgium. You're only comparing it with the
They're all
countries
kind
that
of
had
in the
low rates.
400 to 500 people per million dead, which is, um, and those countries fucked up too. The UK fucked up. Now,
No,
I
nobody fucked
it'll
up. Here's what happened. Okay, it looks like if you look at the death rates, we have a steep V. We have the same number of deaths that we had in in early to mid March. Coronavirus is going away. It's petered out. It's spent.
it's
Hmm.
And crazy people like the Democrats
or
have
people who can look at charts and see that it's
no,
not going away.
I can look at a chart right now. You want to look at deaths, the average deaths, the deaths per day? The
No,
chart
look at
is a
look at
straight
no
V.
fucking look at
No,
new
no.
cases
Look,
in California,
I don't care
Florida,
about the cases.
Texas.
I don't care about the cases. Rick, of deaths is dropping precipitously.
No, the number
It's
of deaths
precipitous.
is leveling out at a steady rate of about a
I'm
thousand a
losing you.
day in
I'm
America.
losing you. I can't hear you.
Oh, well, the
I
number
can't
of
hear you.
deaths. Can you, Maya, hear what I'm
I can
saying?
hear you. Yeah, I can hear
Okay.
you.
I can't hear you.
I don't know what's going on.
I can hear both you
I
guys.
think, okay,
All
you're
right, so
back
I'm
now.
going to
You're
say,
back.
and then Maya, you can say what I'm saying if Lance can't. Can you hear Maya,
I
Lance?
can hear you. I can hear you both.
I can hear both of us.
Okay,
Okay.
all right. So the number of deaths is leveling out at, I don't know, roughly 1,000 a day in America,
No,
which,
it's gone down to about 700. At its peak, it was almost 3,000.
so anyway, over the weekend, the number, because not all states report on the weekend, um, it drops under 1,000, but if you add up the total for the week, it's about 1,000 a day on average.
No, actually, it was 639 on Friday last week. So what I'm saying is, if anybody doesn't believe me, go to the coronavirus worldometer. There's a worldometer, and go to United States and go to daily new deaths in the United States, and you can see that the peak, the absolute peak, was April 21st, and
Yeah.
been a precipitous decline to today. It's gone, Rick.
It's
And the
not.
point is,
It's not a
yeah,
percent. Go to
I
where
know.
Lance
Let
tells
me
you to go.
speak. Let me speak. Let me speak.
Right.
I haven't spoken. You spent a long time talking about the numbers. Now I want to say something. The daily deaths are going down precipitously, and it is only crazy people that want this lockdown to continue. It's crazy. The blue states are doing this deliberately because they want to cause a depression to
But
defeat
we're
Trump.
not locked down anymore. Fucking
No,
people are
no,
doing
you're
shit.
locked down. Rick, you're locked down because if you weren't, we could have done this in my studio.
I don't know.
You're
I like
still,
not having to drive half an hour and 30 miles each way. But yeah, I
okay,
should
well,
probably start coming to your studio again. Carol and I went out for dinner for the first time in 3 months on Friday night, um, and it was not relaxing. It was masks on everybody except when you're putting food in your mouth. You know this.
because people are crazy.
And
No,
people
because
panic.
this week in California we had the most new cases ever.
Rick, I don't
Um,
give a fuck. I just don't give a fuck. You
You
can't
know,
walk into a store. Half of the stores in LA you can't go into. You
yeah,
have to wear a mask everywhere you go. It's insane, Rick. This is now this reminds me of some weird ritual that they would do during the Black Plague in Europe, where people
yeah,
thought that if they danced or wore certain flowers on their nose, they could avoid the plague. You are now part of insanity. This is mass hysteria.
and I have to add something to that. I absolutely agree with you, Lance. And the thing is that what is amazing to me is that I'm still seeing people outside taking a walk in the beautiful fresh air down by, grass and green trees, and they're wearing masks and they're covering their face up to like their eyeballs, which by the way, for me, it's intensely difficult because as soon as I put on a mask, my glasses fog up and I can't see anything. So that
Yep.
is just frustrating to no end. And I tried to walk into a Ross store before because it's been, since 3 months since I've been able to. And I walked out. I just couldn't deal because they're like, "Ma'am, you have to
Yep.
put on a mask." And I was just like, "You know what?
Yep.
Fine. I don't need to be here." I left. So,
yeah.
and, and,
Those
and,
people
and
wearing
like you,
masks are good citizens.
right? That's fine. And I
They're
get it. We're all
crazy.
obedient
The
little
people
soldiers.
wearing the masks are crazy. Do you know, Rick? You're not the only one. I know crazy people. I am having to deal with crazy people right now that haven't left their homes since early March
Oh, that's
because they're
legitimately
so
crazy.
afraid. Wait, I talked with somebody this week that said, well, I haven't left the house for 3 months, and now, besides the virus, there are the riots. So it's just too dangerous. This person's decided to stay in their house indefinitely. We
Well,
don't know when the person will leave the house.
so
That's what
here's
you
well,
people are, Rick.
yeah. You know
This
what?
is the
Fucking,
result of
I
Democrat
understand.
brainwashing.
I understand math is the deal, and before, like, I don't have a job except I'm writing shit at home, but like I don't go to work. My pension just kicked in, so I'm actually getting paid to do nothing. So
Congratulations.
so before we had coronavirus, I just go to mostly where I went was to the gym. I'd go to 5 gyms a day, 4 gyms today. One of them closed, so I'd go out to gyms. Um, Now I can't. I don't go out and once or twice a week, Carol and I would go out to dinner. Um, but the gyms
Is
aren't
there a
open yet.
point? Is there a point to
Point
this, Rick?
is, the point is, like, yeah, I know I could go out without a mask, and I could probably walk into stores and stuff
No, you
without a
couldn't.
mask.
You could not. You could not. You can't go into a store in Southern California without wearing a mask. It's
That's not what I'm
crazy.
saying. I'm saying I could probably go out and do whatever shit that I wanted to do without face protection, like an asshole. Um, and I probably wouldn't get sick, but I might. And if I got sick, I probably wouldn't die, but I might, because I've
No.
got I'm in good shape, but I do have like some comorbidity shit. Um, and I might not die. I mean, I probably wouldn't die, and I probably wouldn't be debilitated. Though there are a bunch of ways that coronavirus can permanently, or they don't know yet because it's a
But
young disease.
but you're looking
But
for
anyway,
something to be afraid of.
but why should I take the fucking risk for the 2, 3, 4% that I get sick? The
But it's your
Why should
choice.
I
You
go
can
out
do
when
that.
I personally have little reason to go out when the gyms open up in a week. I have to decide whether I'm willing to take the risk to go to the gym just so I can work out on my
Right.
favorite fucking app
Right,
machine.
right, but that is your choice, and that should have been your choice since March, since the beginning of this lockdown. This should have always been the choice. The people who are sick, the people who are feeling that they might be compromised in any whatever the way that they are, go ahead and either stay in your house, as Len said, or maybe not go, or maybe wear a mask, or whatever it is you need to do. But why is it that the rest of us, why are we locking up healthy population and destroying people's livelihoods? And by the way, part of the reason for the riots is, people have been locked up. They don't have jobs. They don't have, so now they're just like out there, creating rockets or whatever. That's part of it, right? It's like human nature thing. So, I mean, and not that I'm justifying it in any way, shape, or form, heaven forbid, but the fact that this virus just became this, because, okay, so mind you, I went to the dentist, right, a couple of weeks ago. So the dentist is wearing a mask. He always does when he works on me, but my mouth is wide open and he's like an inch from my face, right? So
Well,
he has
I
to,
went to
because
the
he's
dentist too, and
right.
my
But now that the hair
hygienist was
salons are
wearing a
open,
full shield and a mask, and
and no,
they took my temperature when I walked in.
wow.
They
Okay.
they made me gargle for a minute with hydrogen peroxide to kill anything that might be in my mouth. They usually ultrasound my teeth to get rid of the plaque. They said they don't do that because that aerosolizes the junk in your mouth. So my dentist was taking a gazillion precautions, or my hygienist, everybody in that office, for their own safety, and I assume for the safety of the customers.
Okay, but what I'm trying to say is that my dentist, like, they didn't make me jump through any of the hoops that you just said, because I
Then
probably
maybe
would
you
have.
have a sloppy fucking dentist.
But no, they're not. They're actually excellent office, and they're still working. Yes, they all wear masks, but like I said, they didn't make me gargle or take my temperature or whatever. But the point is that today the hair salons are finally open, and my sister was like, "Yay, I get to go get a haircut," right? Because she's been waiting for 4 months to get that done, and they won't shampoo her hair, so they'll cut it. Everybody, she's wearing a mask. The stylist is wearing a mask. Everybody's wearing a mask, but they won't shampoo her hair because she has to be like right above her doing her hair, like wash. Like, what? How does that even make sense? Because science and data. Where's the data that shows that if you wash somebody's hair, that means what? Because yes, you are a foot away from them or whatever. I mean, some of these. I mean, if you want to take her temperature and make her gargle or whatever, they still wouldn't be allowed because of the stupid rules that we've created that I don't know who came up with and why, that you can, have a haircut, but you can't have your hair washed. Like, that makes no sense.
Well,
I
no,
don't
it
know. I
makes
don't
a kind of
understand
sense
any of these
because
rules.
the research has shown, and I don't know how good the research is, but people who are experts on this shit say that to get the virus, you need to, I guess, inhale roughly 1,000 particles, virus particles, for it to have a really good chance of infecting you. And for that to happen, you need to be near an infected person's airstream for, like more than 5 minutes. So I assume the rule against, if the person who developed the no hair washing rule uh, versus hair cutting is that decided that face to face while you're washing the hair is too much face to face. I don't know, but I know that when we first locked down in March, nobody knew anything, so it made sense to severely lock down. And then as we
No.
find out more and more stuff, we're going to find out more and more about what's reasonable and what isn't. It's
But you know what?
reasonable for me to stay home
Right.
because I have nowhere to go anyway. Because all the places I want to, now you could say, yeah, well, I would have places to go if the gyms were open. And then it would be my decision instead of the fucking, the government's decision. But, we're finding out shit. And if
But
you
you know
look
what?
at,
Go ahead. No, I'm sorry. I just want to say real quick. The
yeah,
whole we don't know, so just in case. You don't just in case shut down the entire world, because it's kind of like the way I've been looking at it the whole time is just in case. So you are sitting around and there's a spider or a scorpion crawls onto your hand. It may bite you, it may not. It may be lethal, it may be not. But you just grab the nearest hammer and just start hammering your hand. So you will kill the spider. You will kill the scorpion, but you would have broken every single bone in your hand. Was it worth it? And I think to me, like that analogy, like my humble opinion, we should have never locked down in the first place. Because you know why? It's not about the virus. It has never been about the virus. And because they wanted to see how much they can control the population and to what extent. And you know what? For them,
yeah,
there was
I
like
don't, I don't buy
3
that at all.
billion
I think that
just for
everybody
experiment.
was, sorry, I think that governments around the world that lock down were looking at the Spanish flu, which is the most direct point of comparison, which I don't know killed like 5% of the world's population.
But again, that's a
Um,
stupid way to make public policy, because you're looking at medicine from 100 years ago. We don't have a medicine from 100 years ago. We don't have the mortality rate that people had 100 years ago.
the
People
only
lived.
difference between now and 100 years ago is that we'll have a vaccine eventually, and 100 years ago they didn't have a shot at getting a vaccine.
No,
But
we
again,
Um,
have better
I don't
medical
discuss this.
treatment, Rick.
okay,
We
so
we
yeah,
have
so we've
better
got
medical
ventilators,
treatment.
but
Yeah,
uh,
no, and we have hydroxychloroquine, and
yeah,
we
you've
have
seen
a
the latest
variety of.
studies. You love the hydroxychloroquine, but more and more studies show that it's
No, there
of
weren't
little
many
use.
studies.
Yeah,
The
I've seen the
Lancet
study that
study
said
has
that
been
maybe it isn't
withdrawn.
effective. I'm sorry. I'm
The
sorry.
the
The big
Lancet
study
the
has
Lancet
there's questions about the big study, but there was
it
another
was
study of
withdrawn.
800 people um, where they used zinc because you like to make sure they use zinc. This was a zinc study, and they showed it was that there was not a statistically significant difference between
Okay, but
using
you're not at all looking at
That's
the number of people who got it and who recovered from it. So again, like how many people, and when they did antibody tests, how many more people than we thought. So again, like the percentages, right? Because we all know numerator and denominator. We all know the denominator is way bigger than we considered it, because we don't know how many people actually already had it. Because again, we didn't lock on down until the middle of March. It's been raging since what, November or December, right? And
no, I don't. I
we
don't
didn't
think
even.
raging. We don't know because the antibody tests generate a huge number of false positives.
Well,
Um,
so is the regular
Rick.
test
Can I
recalled.
can
Go
I
ahead.
say something? All right,
yeah,
listen. The idea that we had to have this lockdown because we didn't know enough about the virus is crazy. Because I knew in March that this virus was bullshit and that we didn't need to lock down. And I'll tell you how I knew. Because there were studies done by a Stanford epidemiologist that showed that the mortality rate was roughly the same as the flu, maybe a little worse. But the point is, I knew one in March that the mortality rate would turn out to be roughly only a little bit worse than the flu, and that's what we found out 3 months later. That is the most advanced scientific opinion, is that if you get this virus, they thought in the beginning, some people said 5% would die. It turns out that it's far less than 1%. It's basically 0.5% die that get this.
No, your
And,
math is
and
shitty. Your math is
no, it's not
shitty.
my math. No, no. First of all, don't interrupt me. The first thing we found out, we knew in March, was that the death rate was vastly lower. And the second thing we knew early on in March was that it generally affected elderly people. We knew that from the very beginning, that younger people were practically immune to it. So for those two reasons, I knew early on that they should never have locked down. And in fact, there was another guy that agreed with me, and it was Governor Santos of Florida. And so what he did was he put
DeSantis.
all the,
DeSantis,
what he
yeah.
did was he put all his resources, his National Guard, all his personal protective equipment, all of his medical resources, all of his quarantining, he did only where the elderly people were. And as a result, the lockdown in Florida was one of the mildest lockdowns on earth, and their death rate is almost the same as California's without a lockdown. So we didn't have to go through this, and people that are still going through it now are crazy.
All right, so the Stanford epidemiologist, who you're a painter, you're not a fucking epidemiologist. The epidemiologist.
And neither are you, Rick. Actually, Rick, you're not an epidemiologist either.
That's true, but the study from Stanford was based on these antibody tests that generate a huge number of false positives. Because the tests are new.
No, that's not what he based it on, Rick. This is what he did. There was, in the very beginning of this, there was a cruise ship that had about 3,000 people on it, and something like 4 or 5 people died. He said that is how you find out what the morbidity of this virus is. And it turned out his estimate was something like 0.5, roughly the same as the flu, a little bit higher, and that's what it turns out to be now.
Except
3 months later.
Except we just passed 2 million confirmed cases in the U.S. And
yeah, I don't care.
Well,
I don't care.
Kind of should.
I don't because your odds of dying. Do you know that nobody has died from this who's under 20 years old in the whole United States? They think maybe 3 people, and even those 3, they're not sure if they didn't have something else. So they could have kept the schools and the colleges open.
Except that everybody in school has people, they go home from school to people and the teachers and the faculty who are not fucking 12 years old.
Those people could have voluntarily quarantined themselves. Grandma could have avoided seeing her grandchild for 3 months, and we would not have had to destroy the entire United States.
All right, so we've had 2 million confirmed cases so far and 112,000 confirmed deaths. Now, just working on now,
that's not how you.
Yeah, but let's just do it for fucking fun. Let's just do it for fun.
The true number is.
See that for a second. I just want to see where he's going with that. Go ahead, Rick.
All right, so 112,000 divided by 2 million is 5.6%. Now
that's not the percentage of people dying.
That's true because there are cases out there, and we don't know how many cases out that are unconfirmed and undiagnosed. We don't know.
That's right. So you can't use the 2 million.
No, you can't. But neither
it could be
can
10 million out there.
It could be.
It could be
so
10 million.
If it's 10 million, then the death rate is a little more than 1%. But we don't know any of that because the antibody tests generate a huge number of false positives. But we do know that it's killed a bunch of people. And
but even the 110,000 or 111,000 that we know they're supposedly confirmed dead, we know that there are people with gunshot wounds that were counted in those totals. People who we knew for a fact that did not die from that. They threw them in there because, well, it's during this time, and apparently nobody dies from anything else anymore. So there was actually in the list that we published in the New York Times a week ago when they published their list of these are 100,000. We're reaching this grim milestone or whatever of 100,000 deaths, and the number 6 on their list was a 27-year-old guy. So the person who was looking at it said, wait a minute, 27-year-old people don't die from this. And so he looked it up and he said, this is a guy who was shot in Iowa or Idaho or something. And he was shot, and they put it in because in his obituary they said something like, due to COVID-19, his the funeral services were held up. Blah, 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 blah. There was a COVID-19, like basically they did a search on the keyword, and that's so we know. And I personally know
All
of
right.
2 people whose relatives said, no, this is not what my relative died from, and
All right,
the hospital wants to put it as COVID because they get more
so
money.
they fucked up. So subtract 2 or 3 from the
No,
112,000.
besides 2 or 3 that I know about, that you have to multiply that out. You know that's
fine,
that
but the way you do it, the way the epidemiologists do it, and what people who is via excess mortality, and that's where every year has a mortality curve, and the mortality curves, absent some unusual event, every year the number of people stacking up dead day after day in America is roughly the same. I mean, you've got variations of 10 or 20,000 by this point in the year, depending on how bad the flu is.
right.
But the curves, so when you look at this year, you've got close to 150,000 excess deaths beyond what you would expect at this point in the year. And we don't know, I don't know anything else besides COVID that would be responsible for so many excess.
I do. See, we've established 6 times in a row. I mention this every week just to see if it'll
suicides?
No, just to see if it'll bore into your mind. I want to see if a fact can actually change your opinion. We've established that in March, there was an edict from 4 Democrat governors of 4 large Democrat states, New Jersey, Pennsylvania, New York, and California, that people with COVID needed to be accepted by nursing homes.
Right.
Okay.
And as a result, virtually a third of the deaths in this country were caused by Democrat governors forcing COVID patients into rest homes where they would kill everyone in the rest home. So that one decision is responsible for about 30,000 deaths, Rick.
It's actually closer to probably 20,000. You're exaggerating, but fine. But
I'm exaggerating. You know what, Rick? It's only 20,000 that were killed by Democrat governors. Excuse me.
Okay,
good
fine,
idea.
but
Maybe we should do it again.
Yeah, but those people, the people who died in the nursing homes,
yes,
they still died of fucking COVID.
No, they died because of Democrat incompetence. Governor Santos refused to do that.
Right.
The Republican states didn't do that.
Yeah, no, what I was going to say, in Florida, they have such a high number of elderly population, right? And yet they didn't have the disaster that was New York and New Jersey and Pennsylvania. And that's because of what Lance is saying, because they made sure that their nursing homes were protected, that they kept them in the hospitals and isolated rather than shoving them back where they would infect everybody who's completely vulnerable. So that's a huge deal. You can't just brush that off.
It is, all right, so I'll give you that. I mean,
wait, there's
I
more
don't want to argue.
It turns out this week, it was revealed that Governor Cuomo was getting huge contributions from rest homes, and he quietly, a few weeks ago, passed a law that rest homes could not be sued by people's relatives whose relatives had died in the rest homes. It's a very unusual law that he passed. So
all right, so that sounds like a shitty law, but so we're going to talk about the 20% of everybody who died because of this rest home shit.
It might be more though, Rick. It might actually be more. It turns out that the numbers of people that have actually died of COVID, that they're sure died of COVID, might have been 50% in the rest homes.
Okay.
And it turns out that not just in the rest homes, not just in Democratic states, but in every fucking state.
in
It
states.
was
And then
mainly in Democratic states, Rick. It was Democrat incompetence that caused the panic. It was Democrat incompetence that caused the huge death tolls.
we've
And
never we
let
haven't
me wait.
mentioned.
I would